So, hello and welcome everyone to our February Agile Boston meetup. And we're very happy to have Al Shalloway here with us. Al is the founder and CEO of Success Engineering and the lead designer at Amplio. He has been a thought leader in the Agile space even before the Agile Manifesto was created in 2001. So Al has a ton of experience. He's been doing this stuff for a long time. He is definitely a groundbreaker in a lot of ways, a trailblazer in a lot of ways. And so we're very, very happy to have Al here. And Al, you're going to talk about the future of Agile and the changing role of the Agile coach.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be focusing more on the coach and the agile role. The whole agile kind of comes with it, and you'll see why that is. So I am going to talk about both.
Wonderful. So everyone, give a warm welcome to Al Shalloway.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to be here. I've been working in the AI space for a little bit of time. Uh, Actually, I've had an interest in this since I was in high school back in 68, 69. I used to read Pat Winston and the AI lab at MIT. A little trivia knowledge is when I was admitted to MIT for graduate work, I was allowed to go anywhere but the AI lab. That was what it said on my admission. You can go anywhere in the School of Engineering except for the AI lab. And the reason was, well, I was interested in pattern recognition and artificial intelligence. And back then, there was a lot of confusion between the two. What were patterns and what was AI? And the AI group, not just my own opinion, were incredibly arrogant about things. And anybody interested in patterns couldn't be interested in AI, was their thinking. So they relegated me to another group, which I was fine with. I love my experience at MIT. But I've otherwise been really seeing the need and importance of using AI tools. And I think we see a lot of changes going on. So what I'm actually going to cover is the current shift. There's a lot going on. It's not just AI. There's a shift away from frameworks. The difference between coaching and consulting and why there really isn't the difference. It's more contextual. The rise of AI, supply versus demand. Let's get real about future of jobs. Coaches must learn to lead, and coaches must be really kind of better than AI. If you want a job, you're gonna be better than the AI system because that's out there and that's virtually free. So that's an important thing to attend to. And just some I thought useful quotes. I love this from Mark Twain. Prediction is difficult, especially when it's about the future. So I do not claim to be precognitive, and I have a history of missing near-term predictions. I mean, within the next few years, I have a history also of being ahead of the industry. The problem for me is that usually I'm so far ahead by the time it happens, people haven't been around when I was there 10, 15 years ago and said certain things would be useful. And not that I'm at all flawless or that I see that I'm the only one. That's not true at all. I'm not trying to say that. Um, so, there's also, I love this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson that I learned from a business coach of mine in the 80s. This time, like all times, is a very good one if we know what to do with it. Many companies that are incredibly successful were formed during the Depression. There's always an opportunity. You have to see what's there. And we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. We're in a different situation, and I would say a problematic situation. People are getting unhappy with Agile in general. It's even a bad word in a lot of places. Um, and finally, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. There are a lot of recurring things where people are defending certain things that, well, people tend to defend the status quo. So the question is, who do you know who to listen to? Is something worth looking at and knowing. Okay, so I'm putting this caveat in. I'm going to make a lot of things and expect a lot of people to deny this coming change. I still see it. People saying, "Oh, we're just in a downturn. Things will pick back up." Actually, we're just about to go off the precipice in my mind. Okay, but you don't have to go with everybody else off the precipice. So there's good and bad here. I personally think it's a huge opportunity for those people, and it may take courage, probably will take courage for a lot of people. But here's the good news about courage, since I mentioned it. Once you step up and you walk into it and takes courage, the next time it will take less courage, and the next time it will take less courage. And eventually it doesn't take courage. It just takes doing the right thing. Courage, I mean, I won't say, yeah, I see you shake your head, Joe, and you're right. But it gets less. The bigger things, you can do similar things with less courage, and bigger things will take more courage, but it gets easier as it goes. Okay. I can remember the first time I told a customer I didn't know how to do something. Man, that was one of the most courageous things I did in my life, because I thought I'd be shown the door. But they said, "Oh, we'll help you." And the next time was still scary, but I knew I was going to do it, so I just did it without thinking. The fear is the fear of what's going to happen, and you're mulling it over. That's when you're terrified. Once you act, the fear goes away. Okay. So a shift from frameworks. This is a year old, but I think this trend is continuing. It's really look at what's here. Frameworks are getting less popular and creating their own. This is not a good thing, by the way. Just don't. I mean, it may be good, may not be good, but just doing ad hoc things isn't necessarily good. But it's important to notice what's growing. Okay, these people are less worried about certification in certain certain frameworks. Now, of course, there's still a lot of jobs out there, because you don't go from lots of jobs to no jobs, but it's diminishing. People do need a foundation. This idea you just pick things leads to a lot of problems. So I don't agree with that. You can't just throw stuff together and do it. There's got to be an understanding of what's going on. In my mind, there's the consultant's role. Now, consultant can be internal. In fact, that's usually a good thing if it can be internal. Okay. And there are two kinds of consultings here. There's what are your workflows? How do you create value? Flow, lean, theory, constraints, and human-centered development is what I found good. Flow, lean, and theory constraints are very consistent. They provide a lot of theory about what you can do, a lot of practices about what you can do. They each have a variety of good emphasis. I don't really I'm not a slave to any one of them. I recently wrote a post why I don't always look for the constraint. There are times you can see other things. Very consistent with Don Reinertson's work. By human-centered development, I mean, how do people learn, think, speak? It has to do with products, and it has to do with how you get people to move forward. This has barely touched the surface in Agile, at least not from the popular frameworks. And the people who think it has, because like in the Scrum Guide, it says lean, let me tell you, it's like the wrapping on an ice cream bar. When you take it off and you look the inside, you'll get some ice cream, but that's not the bar. There are a lot of good people out there doing stuff. Wolfram Mueller, Peter Merrill, Steve Tendon, a lot of my own ACE consultants in the program. Juicy, I always forget his last name. And there are others. I recommend a lot of people a lot. There are a lot of really good people doing this, but it's not mainstream. That's what I mean. It's not mainstream. We have to shift our view of complexity. Scrum is based on empirical process control because we're in a complex system. And I think that's not a good way to look at things. There's a better way to look at things, which is how do we discover what we don't know, and how do we look at uncertainty? There's not like, oh, that's complex and that's not complex. So there's a fair amount of shifting there. I'll go over some of these. But in this one, complexity is kind of ambiguous. It's really, is there this inherent complexity like weather? We're never going to be able to predict weather accurately out months. But then there's a lot of things that look complex, but they only look complex. In other words, there's apparent complexity, but after you understand it, it becomes easier. I remember in 84, 85, around that time, I believe it or not, I was in 86 maybe. I was in the hair salon business. I wrote software for hair salons. I was applying Deming. It was really kind of cool. And one of the people I got to know was Renato Brunis of, I forget now what company he had. He was considered the premier hair colorist in the world at the time. He was in Pennsylvania. And he said it was impossible to create a computer system that would do hair color formulations because there were too many factors and it was too complex. Well, I did a series of interviews with him for weeks. And at the end of it, it was it was two lookups in a database integrated with 4 if statements. And that was the whole thing. In fact, this changed hair coloration. You'll see a lot of hair coloration formulas. What happened is when he took it, some other people, when he took what I did, other people could figure it out and mimicked it. That wasn't AI. That was what's called an expert system.
There's
But
Uncle
it looked like
Jimmy.
AI. Okay. So apparent complexity can be simple when seen, but not understood at the moment. And this is a key piece because different people will see different things, which means a
That's your
team.
baby.
Harriet, I think if you could mute, if people can mute, there we go. So the thing is, different people see different things. So a team can get better understanding and complexity than most people, than an individual rather. So we really want to turn this into how do we discover what we don't know and how do we protect ourselves from what we don't know we don't know. Okay. And that's going to be a different topic, but that's not here. Okay. Now this is the interesting thing about the parables of the elephant. There are actually two parables, and everybody knows one, and few people seem to know the second one. The one everybody knows is we've got this person thinks this person here thinks it's a rope. This person thinks it's a hose. This person thinks it's, I guess, a pole. This person, it's a fan. Here it's a tree. Here it's a wall. And everybody argues. So when everybody has a particular view, we get into discussion. Oh, you're wrong. I'm right. I see what's going on. There is another parable, and I think it's from India, but I'm not certain. I don't think I made this up, but I remember thinking it, and then I read it someplace. What if all these people got together and said, my God, it's an elephant? That's the other parable. In other words, when we try to be right, we don't get very far. We argue. When we try to work together, we can see more of what's going on, even when we're blind to the situation. So I think it's an important parable and a way to shift things. You hear a lot, by the way, I know I'm going to kind of ramble on for a while, but I'm leaving time to have Q&A at the end. And if you have a real burning question or absolute disagreement, please let me know. I have a few minutes for that. But if it's a question about after the, well, what do I do going forward? Wait till after the talk. So coaching and consulting are supposed to be different. Consulting is helping people decide what to do, and the coaching is helping people do it better, is how I look at it. There's also training, by the way. Coaches must know double loop learning. Well, what is that? This is very important because AI will not give you double loop learning as much as a person can. What is it? What is double loop learning? Even some training is needed. In other words, conveying some things. So here's double loop learning. And in this case, I've compared it to Scrum's inspect and adapt because they are different. And this is not appreciated. So in single loop learning, I've got them down here, but then I'm going to walk through this. Single loop learning gets us better at what we do, and it enforces our habits. For example, like we might during a retro say, well, how did that go? Well, we overanalyze. So we get better at analysis. Or, well, how did our daily scrums work for over this week? Well, they were too long. Okay, so we'll get better at the daily scrums, make them shorter, more pithy, and to the point. That's single loop learning. Double loop learning has us question the assumptions to make new habits, like daily scrums. I've almost never done daily scrums as well. I won't say almost ever. In the last few years, I find that a combination of having agreements on letting people know when there's a problem and getting it all done by the time the end of the day is done, we've solved all our blockers, and we have a daily scrum only if we need it. I'm not trying to say which to do, but the point is double loop learning has us question what we're doing. Maybe there's a better way. And you often do that by looking at the assumptions you have. And triple loop learning has us learn how to question our assumptions. So we have a practice, we see what happens, we get better. This is single loop learning. This is like inspect and adapt. Deming's plan, do, study, act, or plan, do, check, act, or the OODA loop by John Boyd. Their OODA and PDSA are different, but they can actually be overlapping each other depending how you do things. Double loop learning, we do a practice and a result. We see how to do better, but we also challenge our assumptions to improve the model, improve our theory. Deming, Da Vinci, Kant, many people say learning without theory is a disaster. It's slow, it's almost non-existent. It's been known for centuries, literally, that people will resist new ideas if you don't have a theory to explain why it happened. Okay. So we need to make a shift. So what about the rise of, I couldn't help myself here. So So we got to pay attention to artificial intelligence. It's not really artificial intelligence. It's amazing, really amazing. But it isn't artificial intelligence in that it can't create, it can only, there are different pieces of it. So you have generative AI, which can be used for pictures, which I use a lot actually, can be used for coding, which is great. But see, even there coding, if your job, if you're a developer program and you're spending most of your time developing by writing code, then you're a programmer. You're not a developer. When I developed products, and I built many, most of my time was spent understanding the customer. And then writing the code was not the big deal. Now, I was a fast typist. I mean, literally, I was like blazing fast. I used to type. If you watched me, this is what my typing looked like, literally words at a time, because I played the piano and I could handle my fingers where they are on the keys real well. Discovering what the customer was up to, not what he wanted and said was important. AI can't do that, at least not now. And I doubt it ever will be able to because it's not a person. And there are a lot of reasons about that. I'm not going to go into that too much. I'll go into it a little bit more. AI can't coach, but it can be used by coaches. It's important to get AI. It's one of the amazing tools. It's one of the most amazing tools there is in so many ways about finding information. I use it every day, but it's not going to replace me. It's not going to replace anybody else who can really think. So it's also based on what's out there. This is what you got to be really, really careful out there. There is a lot of garbage out there. See, and I talked to a lot of AI experts, by the way. I'm working with two different companies. One I'm going to actually use their AI, and the other one is just a good friend of mine. He's building their own in the healthcare field. So he's an expert on it, but I've decided not to go with him for a variety of reasons. Their tool's amazing. People don't take off the internet the crappy stuff we no longer believe. So there's a lot of 25-year-old thoughts about Agile that's still out there as being relevant when it isn't relevant. Flow, lean, theory constraints, this is mostly missing. I say mostly missing because it isn't missing. Again, Blue Dolphin, that's Wolfram Mueller, and Tame Flow, Steve Tendon's work. There's others out there. Goldrat's Rules of Flow, his daughter wrote. Lots of good stuff. Mostly missing. And for those people who say, oh no, safe, Scrum, whatever has it in there, I'm sorry. These are people late to the party who've touched a couple of practices. Putting lean practices into something is not the same as building from the foundation of it. Okay. I suggest you look for AI tools that align. There are people building their own. In other words, this is what I'm doing actually. I'm using HANA Prodigy because it's what's called a large strategic model. I like how he stored it. It's still being built. I mean, it works, but he's enhancing it. I really love how Eric Bueller, this is the Enterprise Agility Institute. I've known them for a long time, and I think I'll be candid. One of the reasons I picked them is I know him. He's a fellow traveler, a fellow visionary, a kind of a soulmate in business. And to me, who's ahead at the moment isn't as important as who's going to stay near the top of the pack for a long time. And he is, I have no doubt of it. So what I'm doing, I'm just giving this as an example, is I'm loading Amplio, my approach into this. And then when you ask questions, you can get it related to a common base. Wolfram Mueller with Blue Dolphin is doing something similar. I don't know if Steve Tendon is with his, but there are others out there. So find somebody you like. If it's not me, that's fine. But don't use generic AI as the main guide. I mean, it's fine to I talk to ChatGPT a lot of times, and I'll say, what about Shalloway's Amplio? I have to say Shalloway's Amplio. It turns out there's another Amplio for something unrelated. So if I just say Amplio, it gives me weird answers. But if I codify with mine, it actually gives pretty decent answers. That's really good. AI can't ask questions. But here's the tip. You can ask it. This is really weird. I've done this. It can't ask questions. It doesn't ask questions, but you can ask it which questions you should ask in your situation. And that you get great answers. It's smart, but it doesn't have that initiative. It's designed to answer things. It's not designed to be provoking questions. It has no empathy. It has no empathy and it can't have empathy. It's not human. Feelings, emotions, the weirdness of human-based behavior is not in a machine. Now, it might be that machines will eventually be able to tell But given most humans can't, I doubt a machine will be able to. I have serious doubts about this. This, to me, is one of the opportunities for coaches. Is how do you get here? When you don't have empathy, you inadvertently get resistance. Very often, you can't see the path to move because of the personalities involved. Now, I admit this is a failure of mine or a weakness of mine that dates back to, I won't say consciousness, but at least college. I like to find the best way to do something. I do. That doesn't mean that deterministic. I mean, I might have a path to navigate complexity and all that, but I'll say, where's the best path to navigate complexity? There's no fucking such thing, excuse my language. And I keep getting reminded by my students that, oh, I went down there, oh, still did it. It's a hard habit for me to break. But part of the reason is because who you're talking to knows is you're going to have a different path. So I have designed Amplio starts any number of ways, and my general approach goes any number of ways. But I admit I have a tendency to try to find the one I like best, and then I have to remind myself. In fact, this is why a support system is useful. I know not to do this, and I still do it. So what I do is in the support system, the templates, the collaboration boards I build, I remind myself, here are 3 ways to go. And oh yeah, that's right. There are 3 ways to go here. So we have to overcome our own tendencies and we have to recognize other people's tendencies. Okay. So here's the reality. Supply is exceeding demand right now. You hear all these stories about people trying to get jobs, and AI is contributing to this. You can get your CV done, your resume, whatever, and it can send out to 500 people. Very easy. Okay. People still want to enter the Agile space. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Reddit. And there's so many people on Reddit who are saying, what do I do? I want to become a Scrum Master, and interesting conversations. So here's what's important. When I say how to differentiate yourself, I'm not talking about a better resume. There are people now trying to take advantage of this by telling you how to have a better appearance. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that won't make the difference, especially when they're trying to get everybody to make a better appearance. You know, you got to be presentable and professional, but you're not going to win off your resume being nice. That's more a way to disqualify yourself, not a way to qualify yourself. You got to do better than AI. Okay. And this is what I think you have to do. No, let me say it a different way. This is some of what I have to do. Or Joe, are you going to give me 2 more hours after this to tell all the things? No, I'm just kidding. I highlight the top things. And now let me explain
We can
this.
always have a follow-up, Al, but not.
I don't mind a follow-up. You know, I don't mind a follow-up at all. Because everything I'm talking about here, I've got blogs and articles and videos on. I'm not just making this. I've been working on this. In fact, let me give a little more background about myself. I just put that slide up there. How did I get to where I am? Because it is relevant. I should have started with a sorry. I guess I saw the familiar faces and I figured a lot of you know who I am. But the history is interesting, and you may not know all the history. So I started out as a dev. I was one of these 10x devs. I mean, I really did. And I had the metrics to prove it, although I didn't think of myself that way then. I just look back on things. And I got into Agile around when XP came out and then came more into process. But what happened from around 2005, 2006 to about 2018 was and still going actually. I looked at what was effective. And I did this by literally talking to about 10,000 people at the hundreds of conferences I went to from 2006 to 2018 when I kind of stopped going to conferences. And what I found was what worked and what didn't work. And I consolidated into a theory, a model based on lean flow theory, constraints, and human-centered development. So what I'm talking about is not like just my theory. My theory is a reflection of what I've seen out in the world. So I kind of integrate things. So one of the things you need to do is learn to do diagnostics. To me, this is a kind of a crazy thing in Agile. We have set prescribed solutions. Now, prescriptions are great, but only if they're right. You go to a doctor to get a diagnosis. You don't go to a heart surgeon and say, Doc, I'm having pain in my chest. I hear you're the best heart transplant person. Go for it. Because this really hurts. I got to get this pain out of here. No, you get a diagnosis. So you're going to need to run diagnoses and saying, by the way, oh, this is good in complex situations. Everything is complex to some level. It's perceived complexity. You need a deeper diagnosis. You need to use patterns with options. I see all this patterns talk. Patterns, there are two kinds of patterns. There's patterns to recurring problems. That's what I see in the Scrum plot. That's what I see in the Scrum patterns. They're really good, really good. But there's still solutions. What you want when you add flow, lean theory constraints, when you take Alexander in, he gives you these, you realize all this stuff gives you the way to make a decision on how to implement it for your situation. That's what's needed. Patterns where you can tailor them. I don't see much of this. There are a lot of useful but little used message, this minimum valuable increment, something we've used in net objectives for 2 decades. It comes from the minimal marketable feature of Denny Cleland Wang, but when SAFe talks about them, even though they refer to the book, it has nothing to do with what's in the book. With your lean UX, that has little to do what's in the lean UX book either. They just, I don't know why they did what they did. It's very aggravating. I'm consistent with the jobs to be done approach. This is brilliant. You can get a free copy of it. It's got 2 parts to it, at least. One part is about how you tell what customers will really find valuable. I kind of invented that before I read this book. We'd been doing this for years. I learned it from some other brilliant people. I didn't invent it, rather I learned it from other places. But I'm very consistent with this idea of how you look to see what are the true goals and how do you truly innovate. I don't think AI is going to be able to do this. Wants and needs don't work well. We all know it, but people still do it. We'll listen to their wants and needs and then try to figure it out themselves. No, that's not what you do. You have to understand them. When I was building software in the 80s and 90s, I understood my clients better than they understood them. Really. We ran a school for hair salons. I was partnered with a supplier of hair salon products. And I would actually show them how to run their salon better than they could run their salon. And I wrote a computer system that helped them do it. And there was one time I wrote a report, took me about a week, that raised the retail sales on average of our clients from 4% to 13%, which basically was a 4.5% instant rise in profit. Nobody asked for that. Well, my partner asked for it. Said, hey, we got to do this. It's a good idea. So jobs to be done. We got to get better product development. Now, I'm not going to go into this, but I'll make a list of references to all this stuff, Joe, and send it to you. The iron triangle is just wrong. The whole idea of these things being opposed to each other and then trying to figure out how to put quality into it or inverting it like Agile does is wrong. Tom Gilbert and I came up with this idea we call the Penta, which has things like scope, and in this case, resources. We put dollars and time in there, but this is the essence. I got inspired on this from Lean. See, Lean is about improving your workflows so you get more done in less time and it's more valuable. That destroys the iron triangle. This is waterfall thinking, and inverting it or modifying it is just doing better waterfall. There's a paper on this, and I've got a seminar on this. I'll give references to that. Coaches need to lead, and there are 3 pieces here. First one is working with different roles. We need to embrace management. I have had some spectacular success over the last 2 decades, and everyone, let me say it again, everyone, no exceptions, was led by a manager or director or a C-level person. Everyone, without exceptions. I'm not saying other people can't do with a team up, but I'll bet you what they did is they got the team working so well, then they got a director or a manager interested, and that's when it exploded. You got to embrace management. They've been mostly ignored or vilified. That's got to stop. By the way, I don't have a lot of problems with management because I don't expect to have a lot of problems with management. When you expect to have problems with management, you're filtering them. You don't see the good stuff. By the way, if you're a coach or a consultant, they often see, I'm not saying look up to them or anything, but be aware of that. Developers are your customers. This is something I've seen for years. If developers don't like something, pay attention to it. They're your customers. Stop saying, oh, the developers are whining. Well, they're whining. They're your customers. Fix what they're whining about. Get them to see the value and do it a way that they see as a value. That's why there's so much lack of motivation in things. But here's the cool. They want to develop. They don't want to figure out the process. They do. They also, though, don't want to be told. What you've got to do is work with them. and you've got to relate their past experience. This follow to understand is in, just, I got to take a breath when I say that. It's crazy. They have all this knowledge from their past experience. Who do you know has not experienced multitasking? Who do you know has not experienced working on too many projects? Who do you know has not experienced on value being useful? Who do you know has not experienced that working on smaller things get stuff done sooner? Who do you know has not experienced that when you work on too many things, you go in overwhelm and you can't get anything done? Who do you know that people tend to be a little bit selfish and focus on their things and not other things? We all know this. So whatever approach you do, tie it back to their experience. This is why theory is important, because theory is consistent across many domains. And then you could relate, well, here's our situation. Do you remember that situation back then? Can you see the parallels? So this is really important. I call it Amplio kata coaching. If that looks a little bit like Toyota kata, it is. I mean, it's not really Toyota kata. To be candid, what happened is it's consistent with Toyota kata. I was very fortunate, but not just lucky. I searched out thought leaders. Back in the 80s, I worked with somebody who talked about how can you tell where you are and where you want to go and how do you do this? He never formalized it as Mike Rother's Toyota Kata, which I highly recommend reading. But we basically had something very consistent with Toyota Kata. That's why when I read the book, I said, "Oh, this is really good." This is because he goes way deeper in writing it than I ever did. So it's a good book. But it's consistent with it. And it was an integration of advanced training methods I'd learned in the 80s with kata style coaching, which I'd also learned back then. It's like what I call a guided self-discovery. This is not your ICF coaching. This is not just life coaching. This is you have a target you want to go, but you never tell them, not because they will resist. I can't tell you how many people have said, Al, just tell me, tell us what to do. But if I do that, see, they're not going to resist it. In fact, I once had a client in the middle of a workshop say, "Oh, you're giving us all this theory. When are you going to tell us what to do?" And I said, "I usually start that the second day." And he literally told me, "If you don't do that when we come back from lunch, we're not coming back from lunch." This was a long time ago. It was like 20 years ago. And I realized, some people like the theory, like me, and then they like to be told what to do. Some people like to be told what to do, and maybe you give them the theory or not. I learned that 20 years ago. They won't resist it, but they won't understand it. They have to discover it themselves. So Toyota Kata is more of a directed way, so you don't spend a lot of time than just asking questions and getting them to get there totally on their own. But the thought that clicks goes on in their head, not from you telling them. A series of questions. How do you do this? You can't be passive. You've got to be proactive. You can't tell them what to do. Okay. That's why I call it guided self-discovery. I learned this in the 80s by having it done to me. I was in a year-long business seminar, and this guy was amazing. This is where I learned Deming. I learned Toyota. He was teaching Deming and Toyota in the 80s. And I learned a whole bunches of stuff. I learned what synergy really was and teamwork really was. He had so many amazing games. But what I realized was he would talk and have like really at some point he'd say this amazing thing, and I would notice the amazing thing 5 minutes before he said it. I was really pleased. I was like, man, I really understand this because now he says it. But I also realized if he wasn't there, I never would have known it. In other words, he was guiding us along without talking about the end result, and we were figuring it out as we went. So then when he finally he did finally give us the end result, but we could understand it because he was guiding us. Okay, here's the bottom line. Oh, I kind of talked fast to finish this a little early. This is the last slide. Well, I got 2 more minutes. The bottom line is this: coaches and consultants must become more capable. I give you a lot of ways to get this. A lot of this information is freely available on my website and in LinkedIn. And I will organize because this was kind of a nice synopsis too. AI is a useful tool. It will cause massive layoffs. We've barely seen this. Okay. Just look at where we are. I don't want to get into politics, but you could just look at from an action point of view. We are about to have inflation. This is what all the economists are saying. We're about to have inflation. We're about to have higher unemployment. We're likely to go into stagflation, kind of a recession. there's a lot of upheaval. That's going to cause layoffs. If you think it hasn't been happening yet, it's going to get much more. I'm talking about the United States, but a lot of you are from the US. Uh, it's going to cause a lot of problems and a lot of jobs are going to get lost. But it also creates a lot of opportunities. This is a metaphor: when one door closes, another opens. Okay. I'm going to give my little opportunity pitch, sales pitch, whatever you want to call it, and then I'm open for questions the rest of the time. When I left the PMI, I should probably put this on my front page. The problem with working in a company is you have a lot of things to do. You have a vision of the company you're trying to help. You're focused. That's good. That's good. But there's a problem to it because it seems there's never enough time to just step back and not do anything for a month except reflect on things. So when I left the PMI, I can still remember this. My wife, was 3 years ago, so I guess I was 69. So I'm 72 now. So my wife said, "Do you want to retire?" And I answered, "No, I mean, I could, but I didn't want to." And because I knew I wasn't complete in what I've been working on since 99, I guess is when I consciously got into this. And I thought, what's missing? How have we missed the target of things? And the key thing that kept showing up for me was training was done incredibly poor. 2-day trainings, you forget most of the stuff. You don't have a chance to try it out in the workplace. It's just overwhelmed. There's only so much you can absorb at any one time, and it's just too theoretical in the workshop because you can't try it and see what it's like where you are, see what that context is. And I decided to start creating a program that was about how to learn effectively. And I called them learning journeys. How do you do it over time? It's not come in for a week or 2 weeks. And, like I built the discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant workshop, and we had even added stuff to follow up at the end, but that kind of got lost when I left the PMI. So what I've done is I've created this thing I call Amplio University, and the cornerstone of it is the Consultant Educators Program. That's everything. And for 6 months, you literally get about 4 hours a week of live stuff plus hundreds of hours of recorded stuff. And I'm raising the price a little bit because I'm getting it to another level. This is about 1/8 the cost, 1/6 the cost of standard training if you measure it from the amount of time live. And the reason is I designed it to be scalable. It took me about 2 years to figure out how to do this. It's not an easy solution. Of course, now that I've done it, anybody could copy me. Blue Dolphin is doing something, Wolfram Mueller is doing something similar. So I want to point that out. He's the only other one I know of. A track here is if you're into Scrum, Amplio Scrum is kind of like Scrumban. I just didn't want to call it Scrumplio. How do you go from Scrum to like a truly flow lean-based Scrum? Now, by the time you get to that, you're not doing Scrum anymore. So I can't call it Scrum because you will change. And I really believe this is the missing thing. I did not know this when I started this endeavor. I had a couple of workshops. I can still remember this, and you should relate to this. Oh, here's an example of teaching theory to relate someone's past practice. So I'm giving a little coaching tip here. I'm actually going to do what I said about using theory to relate to someone's past. You're the past experience I'm looking for. So have you ever taken a workshop where you thought, man, this stuff's really cool. I love this stuff. I understand this stuff. And then you go to talk to somebody and you have no clue how to tell them about it. Or maybe you have a clue, but they don't buy into it and you don't understand what to do now. This is why I learned this. The first year, my first course, people said, Al, this is great stuff, but how do we tell other people about it? So the Consultant Educators Program is not how to teach you to be effective. It's how to teach you to teach others to be effective through coaching and consulting. I think this is another missing piece. And since I made you force a 3 or 4 minute opportunity pitch, I'm giving $50 discounts from here, and $100 on the bigger. Oh, I got them in the wrong order. 100 for this, 50/50. I'll just fix that right now. The full university, I don't mind. See, one of the reasons I can do the low price is not because I could have retired, although admittedly that's helped me figure this out, because I figured out how to do training at scale. It's important to learn over time. This is my other method. If you don't want to do this, great. If you don't want to do Blue Dolphin, fabulous. But learn consistently every week. You've got to be reading books. You've got to be reading LinkedIn's. I prefer LinkedIn for learning because it's more up to date. But there's some awesome books out there. Flow Engineering by Steve Perez, awesome book. We just wrote, if you want to look at things more at scale, there's this book with four of us. All of us are thought leaders in different angles. This was really interesting working with these guys because we all did it a little different. This book is about being an effective coach, is not completely what I'm doing. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. 20 minutes of Q&A. I think that's pretty good. That was my target, was to give you 20 minutes. So questions?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a ton. Um, all right, guys. Yeah, no, Al, thank you very much. For the coupons, do you want to put how to do that in the chat for everyone so they can
For right
want to take
now,
advantage of it?
tell me, yeah, let me just, I'll put that to remind, but just send an email to al.shalloway@success. More info and saw me at Boston Agile. We're about to come up with a new learning management system where there'll be a name, but right now I don't have that. So for the next couple of weeks, just let me know and I'll get you registered at the right price.
Okay,
Thanks.
fantastic. And that book you mentioned was Flow Engineering by who?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, let me pull some of these up. Steve, who is one of our um, co-writers, wrote this. This is a great book. And let me explain the difference between this and what I do. Um, uh, so when I read this book, everything he says I've done, but he explains it very cleanly. And he's very specific in how to do it. Now, there's pros and cons to that. I actually talked to my students who also read this or read some of it. Some of them read this. For people, is really good. You will read this and you'll see how many great tools you have, but then he gives you specific ways to use them. The power of this book is he talks about real tools you can do and the reason behind it. That's all super powerful. The advantage of my approach, so I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm saying in this case, he's better than me by being very specific and showing you how to do it exactly. And I give you a little bit more of the theory behind it. I'm talking about in the university. Um, so I find the two are useful together because one is like predefined templates and mine's more of the thought process underneath it. But this is a great book to read. It's not very expensive. I always love the Kindle because then you can take notes in it. And
Yeah.
he was one of our co-authors, Steve. Here, I'll put
No,
this
Al, so
chat.
so thank you very much for this. I want to just encourage everyone, if you have questions, please either live or via chat, please go ahead. The floor is open.
Yeah, and not just questions. If you disagree with anything I said, that's where the good conversations come from,
Yeah,
in the agreement.
for
Al,
sure.
you said something I just can't get my head around. Uh, but or well, maybe I understand it, but maybe I don't. If you're thinking you're going to think about it later, now's the time to ask the question. Don't ask. I won't be on later. I mean, maybe for another session.
Anybody?
Yeah, Matt.
Matt, please.
Al, thanks for this presentation. This is fantastic. Question for you about I've seen the same trends out in the industry with the large number of layoffs, and I agree with you that we're coming to a precipice and it's moving in that direction. How can people proactively apply what you've shared, your perspective, so the smaller percentage of people who are getting laid off, who are in the Agile community, who really want to do what they need to do to continuously learn the right things, to take the action, how can they proactively set themselves up for success going forward? Whether they're going to be this new name for a coach or a consultant or whatever you want to call it. Like, how do they rebrand themselves, reskill themselves, remarket themselves to pivot?
That is such a great question. And I haven't thought it all the way through because there are three pieces here. I'll admit, the way I've been doing it is I've been working on it mostly from what do they need to know? Okay. But if you know it all, if you know enough, nobody knows it all. If you know enough, that doesn't solve what you're asking. because you're still not going to get people to understand it. So there's two other parts. How do you brand it so at least you differentiate yourself? And the third one is how do people see that that branding is useful? Now, some of the reasons, some of the ways I think, and I haven't done this, but I'm about to, I keep telling myself I need to talk about this more. There are people, one way is there are people who are going away from frameworks. So you could present yourself as I'm a perfect candidate for you if you're trying to build your own, because I do diagnostics and I understand what to do and I can help you. That's only one way. The other way is this. Um, so yeah, that's one thing. So the other thing is learn, and the diagnostics is a big piece because it also lets you look to see what their problems are, and maybe you could relate to that. Now, unfortunately, there's a real lag here. I still think HR is trying to think in old school, and so you have to differentiate yourself. So one other thing is be more amenable to like what managers are trying to come up with and what product managers. Don't fight this, almost see how to accelerate it. How do we accelerate getting more done? Now, this is the other key thing. One of the things, the Amplio program, I'm about to start doing this. I have some ACEs, and I call them ACEs, Amplio consultant educators, who've gone enough through the Amplio system that they can work. Is I'm going to start having, if we go in and consult, we give you a 20% credit of our consulting fees to train your people. So that doesn't mean you have to do Amplio, although it's part of what the thing is. But think about that. What can you do that when you go in as a consultant that doesn't just get them smarter because they were with you, but leaves them with something on their own to get better? Now, one way I do it, but you could do these things without me, is I have a couple dozen boards. If you go like, and there's a lot of good information, by the way, here, I'll show this to you. On success engineering, my website, and I'll actually show you an example of this. You can go to Amplio University. Now, right now, I have the curriculum, a lot of it up here. Like there's a huge amount of videos here. These are also on YouTube where you can watch and things. I'm about to pull in what we give away for free into a Amplio community of practice, which is also free. But the point is this, that's not what I was really looking for. What I wanted to see was, and I always forget where it is. I should probably have a link to it, but collaboration boards is what I wanted. A lot of these are available elsewhere, like these are the boards we give to people in the university, how to estimate. A lot of these I've given away into the public, lean coffees, things like that. These are quite useful. So make a collection of these things. So make it when you go in, you might go in for a few days, but you're leaving with them with something after you leave that they can use. Always look to see how to empower them. This gets scary for some people, but I know some of the people here, and I'm sure they'll confirm this because I've worked with Dan. I know that you go in and there's sometimes you want to keep a long-term engagement, but you think that way you're screwing yourself and you're screwing them. You think, how can I get the most value at this time? And you trust that more or less, or more often than not, that'll lead to something else. So you're always on the cutting edge as a consultant, and you're always leaving a trail of better knowledge. And that's could be a little scary, but it's the only right thing to do. So that's what I got. That was, I think, somewhat useful. And if you want to join one of this free, just come to the website, Amplio Community of Practice, and there's a reg button here. It's free. I've still got 10 minutes.
I had a comment about some of the things you said because
Sure.
I think they really touched home with me. One is the slide you showed of understanding the journey and understanding what the target is. What I've found is a lot of folks, whether they're consultants or they're coming in as a coach or a scrum master, they never ask the question, why are we changing? Why do we feel the need to transform? And what does it look like? In other words, the other thing you said was embracing the leadership, embracing management, and asking them, okay, you're the one driving the transformation. You've hired me and others to bring this transformation about. But we never really sit them down and say, what does it look like when we're transformed? We have this sort of this this saying that, well, transformation never ends, and I never believed that, and I don't think that sells very well either.
Yeah.
Um, so I was wondering if you can expound upon that a little bit about
Yeah.
coming in and being able to establish that target,
Yeah.
that goal, so
So
you can take that measure that progress towards that goal.
So there are really kind of two phases in my mind. One phase is how do we get initial improvement to be fairly strong? And we recognize we should get quick improvement toward the beginning, and then we continuously learn. So in that sense, it never ends, but the onboarding, the improvement is a definite time period that should be months, not years. The other thing I didn't really mention in this talk is when you blend theory with practice and overtime learning, you can learn as much in months that it normally takes years to do. That's how I've designed this workshop. But here's what I do. I came up with I started using value stream analysis, oh, I don't know, 20 years ago at least, maybe before that. And I loved value streams. I was one of the first people who really talked about it. I learned it from Toyota, I learned it from Reinertsen, and I had everything based on value streams. And I came up with this thing. Well, I lived it for years. And then what I found is when I went into big companies, they would not give me the time to do proper analysis. And it was kind of, iffy, as my um, son would say, meh. And I stopped doing it. It was heartbreaking for me. It was like my favorite tool, and I couldn't use it anymore because it wasn't effective. And then about 2019, just before I got acquired by the PMI, I came up with this thing I called the generic value stream. And in the generic value stream, you looked at how they did work, how they should do work. Like, what are the things you do to focus on success and strategy management? Now, we had a different graph in DA because obviously I sold all that IP. But what I do is I talk to them. I do it with animation. I've just got this whole thing. This is on a collaboration board in Lucid Sparks. And this surprised me. I mean, I tried it as an experiment at San Diego Open Space in 2019. And people understood it. I walked through like what you should do from an objective point of view, not from an implementation. I didn't talk agile. I just said, do you know who your stakeholders are? Do you understand strategies? Do you know how to budget incrementally? And they could tell whether they were doing it or not, and they could get an idea of the intention of it. So what we do is I created the diagnostic system that I have also does some of what you're saying. So then what we do is this is that same thing, but I needed to create space in the middle. So here, I'll zoom out a little bit. See, all of this is all here. You can see the color coding. But what this lets me do is now talk to them and say, where are your problems? And they put stickies on. This is all interactive, all this is one of those collaboration boards. Now, as a consultant in ACE who's gone through the Amplio program, you could actually see the cause and effect. With the items being worked on too big, you can solve that by using MVIs and decomposing them. Well, they're not doing that. If you have this problem, they're probably not doing that because that would not cause this not to have this problem. And then from this, I don't have the slide, but you create an improvement. So you get them to understand what they could be doing that they're not doing. And therefore, what we need to do is figure out how to do this. And that's where we don't say to do all these things. That'd be, oh my God. It turns out, see, here's just another mapping we had. But what we end up doing, thought I had another, oh, well, what I have here is I added all these little things here, but we added these but forget the lines here. It turns out most companies to get started, you just need these things. Who is guiding the ship? Do you have a way to look at it? How are we learning? Are we using double loop learning? Use MVIs. Usually these two alone can be just implemented and you get immediate improvement. Think about it this way. Let's say you've got a really messed up system. It takes you 10 times as long to get what you should get out. But let's say what you're putting into the system has 50% of it could be delivered sooner because that's what's really most valuable. And let's say all you did was identify the most valuable stuff that instead of it taking you 10 months, you're going to do half of it. And now you think it's going to take you 5 months. Well, that's value delivery that just doubled. But here's what's good. By working on smaller things, the waste and risk goes down. So if you merely do these two things, you're going to get massive improvement because people work on epics, which is good long-term big crap. most of it's never going to get implemented. So you don't just do a full diagnostic and see how this gives awareness, but then you show them where to start and how to do some things. I don't have it here, but I remember one company we started with what we call the value creation structure. Team topologies is, a lot of people use that term now because of the book. Same idea, different way of doing it, maybe. Sometimes you take, instead of having 20 people throughout the company working isolated and trying to work on the same project, you pull them all together and get them to do, it's not a scrum team, but it's the idea of a cross-functional team. So this is how I do it. And I recognize that this isn't even the thing I started with, by the way. This is a good post to look at. I just wrote this, so I think I could find it. It's why Amplio right here. This would be a nice one to look at. Why Amplio has several different ways to start. I don't start the same way. Sometimes there's an obvious constraint. You walk in and you can see, oh, you're messed up here. Sometimes there's a lot of rework in a place that is causing the problem. Sometimes there are large queues. This is what Don Reinertson likes to talk with. If I can't see all this, then I do this creating the improvement roadmap with a diagnostic system. See, because if you get some quick wins, you get credibility, and then they'll maybe look at the whole thing.
I don't think we have time for any more questions. There was a nice comment from Dan. Understanding complexity is about the interactions of agents or components that create emergent behavior. It's not about hard to understand, and that's a really good comment, Dan. And then, I'm sorry. Do you want to say, Al?
I'm about to synthesize, so I don't know. It's Dave Snowden's Cynefin and my approach have been kind of separate things. And I actually, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Oh, gee, what a surprise. So my view of looking at it from what domain you're in isn't really the important thing. It is what Dan said, these different relationships. But what Cynefin does give you that I hadn't thought about enough. Oh, well, there's another missing piece. The other missing piece is the real problem is nonlinearity. Little thing happens big, but you didn't see that little thing because of the complexity. So what Snowden's work does is he says, when you're in this situation, but I don't like calling it complexity, high degree of uncertainty, high degree of ambiguity, which you can get from VUCA as well, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. When you have a lot of uncertainty, you need to take these actions. But you don't talk about it as complex system because it may not be complex. It may be I don't understand it. So I want to be empowering to people that what can I understand? So it's a different attitude. Anyway, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted you, Joe, but that's what I...
No. Thank you for that.
And I'm writing this up, by the way, because it's what I have is him and this, and I'm going here a little bit. But that shift is going to be more of a path to take when you're dealing in highly uncertain situations.
Yeah, unfortunately, words have certain definitions, right? And complexity has a definition, which I think is around the emergent behavior from the interactions.
And you absolutely need that.
Yeah.
And you have to, the quick answer is you need quick feedback. There's no way you see everything, but you need to detect it as soon as it happens.
Right.
You can't do that in the physical world because you might detect it. There's nothing you can do about it. But in software and product development, you can course correct. And that's one of the big things. So learning how to course correct is an important thing. That's something I should have added to this.
Al, we're at time. So I'm going to have to end it for today. But I will post this recording up on our YouTube channel. So please, everyone, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't, Agile Boston. Hit that like button if you like this content or if you like other content on our Agile Boston page. And Al, I think we're definitely going to invite you back for a follow-up because this has been a fantastic presentation.
I love talking.
With a ton of information, and it sounds like you have a ton more information.
This just scratched the surface, but it gives you enough to think about. I was trying to create a scaffolding.
So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining, and we can't wait to see you all again. Take care.
Take care.